The dream of grade did not begin with danger. It began, as so many American road stories do, with hope. Hope that distance could be shortened. Hope that commerce could move than muscle and mule. Hope that the high Cumberland Plateau, beautiful, stubborn, and unyielding, could finally be crossed without apology. In the early decades of the 20th century, this stretch of southern Tennessee stood like a quiet gatekeeper. To the east lay Chattanooga and the promise of the industrial South. To the west, Nashville and the steady pull of markets beyond. Between them rose Mountain, its steep face carved by time, rain, and gravity. For generations, climbed it slowly, often on foot beside their wagons, listening to iron rims grind against stone. Progress came here at a measured pace, and the mountain never forgot who was in charge. By the 1920s and 1930s, America's faith in the automobile had hardened into certainty. Roads were no longer conveniences, they were declarations. State planners spoke in confident terms about grades and alignments, about conquering elevation with engineering. Records suggest that were seen not as a warning, but as a challenge, one more obstacle that modern machinery could overcome. The goal was simple, almost modest in its phrasing: create a dependable route across the plateau. Yet simplicity can hide ambition. To carve a roadway down its western slope meant working with unforgiving terrain, thin soil, fractured rock, sudden fog, and weather that could turn without notice. Engineers calculated slopes that were aggressive even by the standards of the day, trusting brakes, skill, and to do the rest. At first, the road served families and farmers, salesmen and Sunday drivers, but it was freight that would give its identity. As trucking emerged as the backbone of regional commerce, this descent became unavoidable. Coal, lumber, produce, machinery, all of it had to go down the mountain. And once something goes down grade, there is no pause button. Gravity takes the wheel. Early truckers learned the road by feel rather than signage. They talked about it at fuel stops and loading docks, trading advice in low voices. Downshift early. Watch your temperature gauge. Respect the mountain. There was no romance in it, only responsibility. The road did not care how new your truck was or how tight your schedule felt. What planners envisioned as a triumph of connection slowly revealed another truth. Grade was not merely a passage, it was a test. A place where modern ambition met ancient landscape and neither fully won. The dream had been to tame the mountain. Instead, the mountain agreed only to cooperate on its own terms. And so the story begins here, before the warning signs, before the runaway ramps, before the legends whispered among drivers. It begins with belief, with lines on paper, with the quiet confidence that America, once again, could build its way forward, without fully knowing the cost of going downhill. As we begin our journey down grade, we invite you to remember the roads that shaped your own story, and to hold a quiet curiosity for the journeys yet to come. Building a road down mountain was never a matter of laying pavement. It was an argument with gravity, negotiated one cut at a time. Surveyors arrived first, walking the slope with notebooks and chains, marking a path that tried, politely, to follow the mountain's contours rather than fight them outright. Even so, every measurement carried consequence. A few degrees too steep, and brakes would fail. Too shallow, and the road would snake endlessly, choking traffic before it ever reached the valley. Construction crews worked in stages, often season by season. Period accounts describe men drilling into limestone faces, setting charges by hand, and waiting for controlled blasts that rarely felt fully controlled. Rock slides were common. Equipment broke down. Rain turned work zones into slick traps where a misstep could send tools or men tumbling downslope. Progress came slowly, and no one pretended otherwise. Unlike the flatlands, demanded respect from machines as much as people. Early graders strained under loads they were never designed to handle. Trucks hauling stone crawled uphill in low gear, engines screaming, while others crept downhill, brakes smoking long before the valley floor appeared. There were no shortcuts here. only patience, repetition, and acceptance of limits. Engineers debated drainage constantly. Water, not traffic, was the mountain's most reliable force. Channels were carved to carry away from the roadway, though every storm tested those assumptions. Fog settled without warning, swallowing the worksite in white silence. In winter, ice formed first at the top, invisible from below, catching drivers and builders equally unprepared. Yet the road took shape. Lane by lane, curve by curve, grade emerged, not elegant but purposeful. Guardrails were added where there had once been nothing but air. Warning signs appeared, modest at first, as if unsure they would be needed. The grade was steep, yes, but the belief remained that discipline and design could manage it. For the workers, this was not legend. It was long days, calloused hands, and the quiet pride of shaping something permanent into an unforgiving landscape. Few imagined how the road would be remembered. They were building a connection, not a cautionary tale. When the final surface was laid and traffic began to flow, grade stood as a testament to its era's confidence. America was on the move, and the mountain had been made passable. But passable is not the same as forgiving. The build was complete, yet the road's true character, how it would behave under weight, heat, and human error, had only begun to reveal itself. By the middle of the 20th century, grade had settled into its role, not as an experiment, but as a daily reality. This was the road in its prime years, when trucking was no longer new and the South was no longer isolated. Freight moved on schedules now. Engines were stronger. Drivers were professionals, and stood between destinations like a familiar adversary, respected but unavoidable. For truckers running between Nashville and Chattanooga, the mountain became part of the job's rhythm. The climb demanded patience, but it was the descent that focused the mind. At the summit, men pulled over, stepped out of their cabs, and placed a hand near the wheel hubs, feeling for heat. Air brakes hissed softly as drivers checked gauges, knowing that what came next would offer little mercy for mistakes made at the top. Down the grade, the world narrowed. Curves arrived in steady succession, each one revealing just enough of the valley to remind drivers how far there was still to fall. In summer, brake linings gave off a sharp, unmistakable smell. In winter, fog and ice turned distance into guesswork. Yet day after day, the road was conquered through discipline rather than speed. Along the route, roadside life flourished. Small diners near the plateau catered to drivers who knew better than to rush the mountain. Coffee was strong, conversations were brief, and advice was freely exchanged. Everyone had a story about a close call, a runaway rig, or a driver who didn't make it down. These weren't told for drama. They were warnings, passed along like tools. Passenger cars shared the road. Families bound for work or weekend travel, often unaware of the calculations unfolding inside nearby cabs. Truckers watched them closely, knowing how quickly a light touch on the brake could become a liability. Taught awareness of weight, of weather, of one another. This was the grade's golden age, not because it was safe, but because it was understood. The road and its drivers reached a kind of uneasy agreement. If you followed the rules, gearing down, trusting experience, respecting the mountain, you would likely make it through. But even in its years, carried an undercurrent of tension. Every successful descent reinforced the same lesson. Survival here was earned, never guaranteed. The mountain allowed passage, but it never offered forgiveness. By the 1940s and 1950s, grade had become more than a stretch of pavement. It was a rite of passage for anyone moving goods across the Cumberland Plateau. The road with life, the steady rhythm of diesel engines, the occasional blast of an air horn, the faint hiss of brakes cooling after a long descent. It was a road alive, not with chaos, but with the precise, deliberate energy of those who understood it. Truckers of this era knew the grade intimately. Men like Samuel Red, a veteran hauler of coal and timber, recalled stepping out of his cab at the summit to test the air brakes by hand, feeling the metal rims and brake drums warm from the climb. Others, like Helen Price, one of the few women drivers in the region, memorized every curve and switchback, calculating speed and gear ratios in her mind like a pianist reading sheet music. There was a rhythm here, a dance with gravity, and only those who respected it could survive. Down the western slope, the grade tested every skill. Curves appeared in rapid succession, each one sharper than the last, with sheer drops reminding drivers that the margin for error was thin. In summer, brakes steamed from overuse. In winter, ice and fog transformed the descent into a corridor of uncertainty. Drivers learned to listen to the tires, to the wind, to the sigh of compressed air, because every sound carried meaning. A subtle shriek could signal overheating brakes. A vibration might warn of an uneven load shifting. In those moments, instinct often mattered more than experience. Roadside life reflected the road's intensity. Small diners, gas stations, and service shops clung to the edges of the plateau, catering to weary drivers who had survived the mountain and needed a moment of calm. Coffee was always strong, advice freely given, and stories traded as cautionary tales. Drivers warned each other of hidden patches of ice, slick spots from rainfall, or a weary rig ahead. These were not stories for entertainment. They were instructions, passed from one generation of drivers to the next. Passenger traffic added another layer of complexity. Families in sedans and station wagons shared the road, sometimes oblivious to the calculations unfolding in nearby cabs. Truckers learned patience here, learning to anticipate mistakes not just in their own, but in others. Every descent reinforced the same truth. Respect the mountain, respect your load, respect your fellow. It was during this period that the grade earned its reputation, not through accidents, but through mastery. Those who descended safely understood the balance between caution and confidence. The road demanded vigilance, yet rewarded skill. Grade, in its golden age, was no longer merely a path across the plateau. It was a proving ground, a quiet monument to those who dared to move America's commerce one careful mile at a time. Here, the mountain and the drivers reached a fragile equilibrium. The road would challenge anyone who tried to hurry, but for those who paid attention, it offered passage, consistency, and the quiet pride of surviving a descent that had claimed the unwary for generations. By the 1960s and 1970s, the world around grade began to shift. The interstate system was reshaping America, promising speed, predictability, and routes that bypassed the mountain's steep, unforgiving slopes. Trucks grew larger, and freight schedules demanded efficiency, not patience. Once a proving ground of skill now seemed almost antiquated, its curves tight, its grades severe, its margin for error shrinking under the weight of modern expectation. For the truckers who knew it best, this era brought a quiet unease. Drivers like Joseph Joe, who had run coal from Chattanooga for decades, spoke of the mountain with a mix of reverence and dread. "You respect it," he would say, "but the bigger the load, the less it respects you." Air brakes that once sufficed struggled under the newer rigs. Even experienced operators began to rely more on luck than mastery. Claimed attention like it always had, but now the consequences of miscalculation were sharper, often more public, and rarely forgiving. The roadside economy that had once supported weary drivers began to fade. Diners and service stations closed as traffic shifted to bypasses and interstates. Advice once freely exchanged over coffee was replaced by cautionary signs and guardrails, mechanical interventions standing in for the wisdom of veteran drivers. The mountain's character, the intimate dialogue between human and road, was muted, replaced by regulations, safety campaigns, and the occasional news story detailing a runaway rig or a tragic descent. Yet the decline was not only physical. The culture had changed. Younger drivers, trained on modern highways and shielded by automated systems, often failed to appreciate the mountain's demands. Their experience was measured in miles per hour, not in the nuanced feel of a shifting load, the subtle warning hum of overheated brakes, or the precise rhythm of gear changes through hairpin turns. Grade, once a living classroom, became a challenge to be endured rather than understood. Accidents, once rare but instructive, became inevitable and visible. Records suggest the number of runaway trucks increased sharply during this period, and each incident reinforced the mountain's reputation as a place to fear. Local residents remembered stories of fires and overturned rigs, the nights when sirens pierced the quiet plateau, and the long, slow work of clearing tons of machinery from a hillside. Even the bravest drivers admitted that could no longer be tamed by skill alone. It demanded respect, and sometimes resignation. By the late 1970s, the grade's decline was clear, remained necessary, but it was no longer the celebrated proving ground of the Golden Age. It had become a relic of a different era, a road shaped by hands, hearts, and experience, now confronted with machinery and expectations that outpaced its design. For those who had mastered it, the mountain was still alive in memory, a warning, a testament, and a quiet reminder that progress, for all its promise, often leaves its elders behind. Today, grade exists as both passage and memory. Trucks still roll over its steep curves, though fewer in number and often smaller than the massive rigs that defined its golden age. Yet for those who remember the mountain's most demanding years, the road carries a weight beyond asphalt and signage, a weight of history, skill, and stories that refuse to fade. Veteran drivers, now retired, speak of with quiet reverence. They recall the first time they handled a heavy load down the western slope, the steady hiss of brakes, the heat radiating from drums, the precise coordination between hands, foot, and engine. To them, the mountain was a teacher, demanding, unforgiving, yet fair to those who listened. Their stories form the backbone of the grade's living legacy, passed along in conversations at truck stops, over coffee, or during slow climbs to the summit with younger drivers who seek to understand the rhythm of a road that modern instruments can measure, but cannot fully convey. Its roadside life has faded, yet fragments remain. A diner with chipped enamel signs, a service station that still all stains the asphalt beneath its pumps. These are the quiet markers of a past era, reminders that the road was once more than a route. It was a community. Historians and enthusiasts have begun to document the grade's history, photographing curves, runaway ramps, and those who survived its trials. Their work is both preservation and homage, that the lessons of the mountain, its demands, its beauty, its dangers, are remembered as part of the broader story of American trucking and road building. The mountain itself seems unchanged, indifferent to human presence. Fog still curls around the summit in the mornings, rain still slicks the curves in autumn, winter still coats the slopes with a layer of ice that commands caution. Yet for those who understand grade, the road is more than geography. It is a living archive of human experience. Every skid mark, every guardrail, every repaired stretch tells a story of effort, ingenuity, and respect. For modern drivers, the legacy is often subtle. The instinct to downshift early, the habit of watching gauges as if they can speak, the quiet acknowledgement that some roads demand more than speed or efficiency. For the communities that grew up along the grade, the legacy is equally tangible, a reminder that progress comes with risk, and that the human element, the skill, courage, and patience of drivers, remains inseparable from the history of the road. Grade endures as a bridge between past and present. It is a place where the achievements of mid-century engineers meet the lived experiences of truckers who climbed, descended, and survived its relentless slope. In remembering it, we not only the mountain, but the people who met its challenge, and in doing so, carried America's commerce, culture, and confidence forward, one careful mile at a time. As we look back across the decades, grade stands as more than a strip of asphalt carved into Tennessee's Cumberland Plateau. It is a mirror of American ambition, a record of human perseverance, and a quiet monument to the drivers who met its demands with skill, patience, and resolve. The road tells a story that begins with vision, continues through and mastery, endures decline, and remains alive today in memory, habit, and respect. The mountain does not soften with age. Fog still drifts along the curves. Winter ice still claims the inattentive. Summer heat still tests the endurance of machinery. Yet the danger is no longer a constant threat, thanks to modern engineering, warning systems, and the lessons learned over a century of experience. Even so, for those who once faced its full challenge, grade retains an almost sacred aura, a reminder that mastery was once measured not in miles per hour or efficiency, but in the quiet understanding of weight, momentum, and timing. Veteran truckers, now grey and retired, recall the grade in stories told softly over coffee, in garages, or in interview rooms where their voices carry authority and nostalgia in equal measure. They speak of air brakes that steamed on descent, of shifting gears with precision, of the moment when a curve appeared just as expected, or when it did not. They speak of camaraderie, of shared warnings, and of the unspoken rules that governed life on the mountain. Respect for the road, respect for your rig, respect for those who had traveled before you. For younger generations, grade can feel like legend rather than lived reality. They may measure it in GPS coordinates, traffic counts, or safety ratings, but they cannot fully know the mountain as it demanded skill and focus in every mile. That is the road's enduring lesson. Technology may change, vehicles may evolve, but the human experience, alertness, courage, remains the most vital element of any passage. In the communities along the grade, the road is remembered as both challenge and connector. Small towns and roadside stops, though diminished from their golden age bustle, stand as living reminders that the mountain shaped lives as surely as it shaped commerce. Families, drivers, and local historians continue to that heritage, preserving stories, photographs, and that capture a period when grade was as formidable as it was vital. Ultimately, Grade's story is a meditation on America's roads themselves, the dream of connection it demands, the triumphs and tragedies it fosters, and the memory it leaves behind. It is a tale of people meeting nature's resistance with skill and patience, of a road that tested character as much as it enabled progress, and of the enduring human capacity to respect both challenge and achievement. As the sun rises over the Cumberland Plateau, casting long shadows across the curves, the mountain stands unchanged. Yet in the minds of those who traveled it, and in the stories preserved for those who will, grade continues to teach that every journey, no matter how steep, carries lessons worth remembering, and that the passage of time only deepens the quiet reverence for a road that demanded everything of those who dared to descend. And as the mountain stands unchanged, we encourage you to share these stories, the drivers who dared the grade, and reflect on the roads that continue to connect our past with the present.